Answer to his question about the subjects.
There are more questions than answers.
Radio Commands, talk today.
Oh, what a compliment. For that, I thank you.
What is happening now? There are hopeless and hungry.
Now it's time for us to stand up for God or we fall to nothing.
It's time now for Radio Cayman's Talk Today. If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
Listening to the general public, what the public is saying.
And good afternoon, Radio Cayman Nation, and a very happy Tuesday. Thank you for tuning into your station of the nation, Radio Cayman. I am Ray Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. We do hope all of our listeners have had a very Merry Christmas and enjoyed this recent long weekend and the great weather that we were able to enjoy this past weekend. On today's show, we are very pleased to be featuring CI Retro with Mr. Loxley Banks. And joining us as well will be Miss Patricia Jackson, otherwise known as Miss Patricia Patino Langfit. Our program today will be focusing on Christmas in Cayman over the past 150 to 175 years. We'll be discussing the music, dance, food, cooking, sand yards, travel, shopping, trade, the bull runs, the sailing regattas, family, and the church. As always, we do welcome your stories, feedback, and questions and invite you to join our conversation. Simply dial 1-800-534-8255 or 949-8037. And a special invite to our listeners over in Cayman Brac. We will have a special Cayman Brac segment to CI Retro a little later in the show. On that note, we'll be back with more talk today following this very brief disclaimer.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255.
Courtesy of Flow.
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
And welcome back to our special Talk Today CI Retro broadcast. Very pleased to have in studio Mr. Loxley Banks and Miss Patricia Patino Langfit, otherwise known as Miss Patricia Jackson Patino.
Correct.
Welcome to
Thank
CI
you.
Retro and Talk Today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, and you know, Miss Patino or Miss Jackson, what's the last name?
Langfit.
Langford.
Langfit.
Langfit, okay.
Langfit.
She was Miss Cayman Islands, 1977.
She was. We were just having that conversation before the show. And
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a bit of a long time ago now. But
no, it was a moment ago.
a moment ago.
It was a moment ago. Do you still have like fond memories of that whole experience?
I do. I think it was, I think it's because everything about it was so new at the time. You know, obviously they had pageants before, and some of my relatives had represented Miss Cayman pageants, but mine was the first official one where they sent someone off the island, and I just remember there being a number of firsts, so it was a lot of scattering and, trying to get things together to either run to Miami or run to Houston or run to New York and promote Cayman and come up with new ideas. And we had the first Pirates Week, the first world pageant, the first, promotions off the island, and some of the other islands. So it was actually a very exciting time. Looking back on it now, I'm thinking, wow, how did we do all that?
It's impressive because you actually set the stage for what has evolved over the past, my math is off here, 43 years.
Well, and
roughly.
everything was new. I was talking to Loxley. I mean, Radio Cayman was new.
It was. Everything was brand new back then.
Everything was brand. We had a brand new studio. I was the first Miss Cayman on the air. I mean, it was like so many firsts that happened at that time. So it is really, really wonderful to look back and to look at the people who really were the pioneers of things that were happening at the time.
Absolutely.
I learned how to dive on Bob Soto and his boat, and my cousin Cam Jackson, and they did many, many firsts for the island. and looking at Loxley and Radio Came In, and what a big deal that was, because we didn't have any radio. We obviously didn't have television, but we had very limited radio at the time.
No, absolutely.
You could get BBC in through really late at night, or you listen to Miami stations really late at night. But there was a lot of time where you had nothing. So Radio Came In was really, really exciting at the time. We had new plane, Cayman Airways. We had so many things happen. We'd opened a Cayman Airways office on the corner of Fort Street, and I remember being the first one to work in there. So it was just a lot of very exciting firsts. You
mentioned the limited radio access that was there. I remember during the last CI Rector episode, we briefly mentioned, I think it was Bontown, you mentioned there was one family in Bontown that had one radio, that everyone would actually congregate around that one radio.
Well, that was quite common within the districts. When I was growing up in West Bay, 83 years ago, I don't believe there was more than 2 radios in the total district.
That's true.
Yeah, it was probably the same way in various districts, in all the districks.
Yeah, our family had one radio, and everybody would come to listen to
the family home with the radio.
With the radio.
It's impressive.
Yeah, it was usually the old salties, the seamen. Okay. Usually because they were very up. Let's say they wanted to know what was going on in the world, so they brought their radios home if they could afford it. And usually they were the big 45-pound helicopters, oceanic, and it had, I suppose 16, 18 different frequency bands where they could tune in anywhere in the world.
45 pounds worth of equipment being hauled around. That's an impressive feat.
Well, I just remember that we had limited time, like when Radio Came In started. I mean, we had the morning program that would come on, and then it would shut off, and then you had nothing.
Right,
and then, like about noon, something like that, then BBC World News would come on. You go,
of course, yes.
Wait, we had to tune into BBC World News. And then it would shut off. And then in the afternoon, we had the Pick of the Pops.
Yeah.
What was it called? The Pick of the Pops?
Pick of the Pops.
Pick of the Pops.
That's what's now between 3 and 6.
Super Jam. Who came up with the name Pick of the Pops?
Well, that was kind of imported from across the pond.
Yeah, across the pond.
Yeah.
You don't forget anything. I love this about Mr. Banks. There's nothing that's forgotten. I can ask him anything about any historical date or fact.
Make sure you write them down.
You got to write them down.
Yeah, write them down.
No, I know. Thankfully, all these segments are archived, because the wealth of information is sitting right here and never forgets. It's great.
Well, and they had like some of the first broadcasted serials, or the, like soap operas.
Yeah.
And so
somebody
just put that online the other day, and I said, "Oh, does anybody remember the 30 Days Hath September?"
In the House of Gold.
In the House of Gold, yes. We used to, because you had nothing else. You would just be just totally enthralled listening to the radios.
I think, Ray, we got a packed program, so we better move on with the whole.
I'll let you navigate this shit today.
All right, well, there we go. Good to be hosting with you, Ray, and remembering Cayman Islands Christmases is so important to us all, so as not to let our culture and our heritage be swept up or buried out by outside influences. And you folks got anything you want to add to that? I mean, our culture, our heritage is very, very important to us.
Very much so.
I mean, you got to keep it up front and keep it where everybody knows what it is. Because
completely agreed.
If we don't know what it is, then
it's hard to carry on.
Yeah, plotting the way forward, we'll have to wind up anywhere.
You're absolutely correct. No, it's that's why these shows are so important. It brings everything back into focus.
And well, let's get right on with the program. The first narrative that we're going to hear is from over 40 years ago, of what Caymanians were wishing for Christmas. This narrative was recorded by Radio Cayman's former Deputy Director and News Director, the late Doran Miller. And Doran went out on the streets back in 1977, 78, I guess it was, and canvassed people. And people did not really want to speak into a microphone back in those days, but here's what he came up with, what they were wanting for Christmas.
Since the birth of Christ, the Christian religion has observed that very special event in different ways throughout the many countries of the world, the Cayman Islands being no exception. The religious importance of Christmas is timeless and, of course, should be changeless. But has there not, in fact, been a reversal of attitudes towards the most important aspect of Christmas?
210. $25.
What does Christmas mean to you?
Christmas means being with my family and friends and just having a good time, drinking lots of champagne.
And what do you hope to get for this Christmas from Santa Claus?
Oh, I'd love to get a nice 450 SL Mercedes-Benz, which I don't think I'll get, but I'd love to get that.
And what does Christmas mean to you?
Christmas means to me having a good time and being with my family.
And what would you like Santa Claus to bring you?
I'd like to have a nice bracelet and a bunch of nice stuff, doesn't really matter.
Gold.
Yes, of course.
And what does Christmas mean to you?
A lot of excitement and fun and a lot of good times.
And what do you hope Santa will bring you?
Possible a TV set, a colored one, I hope.
What does Christmas mean to you?
Well, it means that I'll get a couple of days off from work and enjoy myself like everybody else does.
And what are you hoping, what kind of present are you expecting for Christmas?
Well, hopefully I'll be getting a new car.
What does Christmas mean to you?
Spending a lot of money, having a good time.
And what would you like Santa Claus to bring you?
A trip around the world.
What does Christmas mean to you?
Having a good time, going to parties and enjoying myself, meeting other people.
And what would you like Santa Claus to bring you for Christmas?
A 1980s Toyota Corolla.
What does Christmas mean to you?
Christmas means getting together with old friends and having a good time and hard work.
And what do you hope to get from Santa Claus?
Well, I don't really hope to get it this year, but one day I hope to have a Mercedes Sport.
What does Christmas mean to you?
Christmas to me means celebrating the birth of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And it's sort of like communion, just rejoicing in his birth.
And what do you hope Santa Claus will bring you for Christmas?
Maybe a nice cross and a gold chain.
The voices you've just heard are representative of today's young people and their views on the meaning of Christmas.
And welcome back. That was that was Mr. Doran Miller, the former deputy director and news director for Radio Cayman. Now that segment took place in 1977.
Yep, 77. It could have been 78. I'm not sure, but it was 77. 77. Yeah.
So the highlight for me of that reel was the 1980 Toyota Corolla.
A few Mercedes, and there's the Corolla.
There were a couple Mercedes in there. A color TV set was the other one.
Well, and thinking back, a color TV set, that's what they were looking for. But there was no TV. There was no television here at that time. There was no, and what they were going to do with a color television set. Of course, there were a few people who had
videos.
Yeah. So I guess, not even, I don't believe that the cassette video things were beginning. They might have been.
They actually had a few because we used to go meet up at the White's house, Marguerite White's house, because I would hang out with those 10 children, the most wonderful family in the world, and it was like my second home, and they had the beta type version of this or whatever it was, and they would get the tapes in from England, and so we would all, again, it was like the radio several years later, a few decades later, where we would gather around and we would all pile in a room and try to watch what they had on these videos. And that's why you needed a television, but of course we had no television frequency, broadcast. So
if you might have noticed, there were, I think, only one reference to the religious aspect of Christmas.
There's one.
And I think if that same operation had been done, say, 20 years before that, you would have probably, the majority of them would have been the religious aspect of Christmas and what it means to Cayman, what it has meant over the years. Now, I wanted to go out on the streets this year and do the same thing, just to kind of, have some contrast. But what do you think folks were looking for this year?
I think he still would have got a few Mercedes-Benz in there. I don't know if the 1980 Toyota Corolla would have been on that list. And you know what? The color TV set, remember, because they were huge when they first came out. There were these, now everything's a flat screen. But only a couple of years ago, there were the big, diamond-shaped box sets that when you have to carry, you have to do like this and throw your back muscles out because they would tip weight forward.
I think color TVs would still be up there because when I went to Black Friday, it cost you less. Somebody had like 6 in the cart. I'm like, how many TVs can you have?
Did you see any fights?
Massive TVs, massive TVs.
But it's true.
Talking about television back in those days, there were a few people who had antennas, special antennas, and some of them I think created them themselves. And once in a while, they could get a live television because the television signal goes on a kind of skip, and some of them would land down here in this vicinity, and you could watch it for 15-20 minutes, and then it would skip out and go on again. But
the good old rabbit ears. So. You mean the old rabbit ears, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, no.
Had big antennas.
Yeah, it was big outside antennas. I remember coming down here. Prior to that, maybe in 1972, 73, and talking with the chief secretary at the time, and it was probably even earlier than that. Might have been during the mid '60s because I remember the thing that had him puzzled. And he said to me, and he called the name of the person, and they had one of these kind of homemade systems. He said, they tell me that they watched the last space shot. I said, I don't believe that, mister. I called his name. He says, well, they say they did. I said, well, maybe they did get 30-second skip down here, and they were able to see that. But actually, live television didn't come into Cayman until the satellite dishes.
Right, the big satellite dishes.
Big satellite dishes came in,
And those who could afford them,
yes.
The big, huge dishes.
Yeah, and they were costing $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 at the time.
Yeah, massive.
But a lot of people opted for them because they were being financed.
Okay, I didn't realize that part.
Yeah.
And then after that big hurricane, this is before Ivan, and you got the songs of people singing, "Where my dish, where my dish."
Well, that was Gilbert. That was
Gilbert. That's right.
On that note, we do have to go to our commercial break. We'll be back with more talk today and our special broadcast of CI Retro right after this break.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best and sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
The road to becoming a British Overseas Territories citizen just became a lot smoother. You can now apply online at online.odg.gov.ky. If you or someone you know needs to be naturalized or registered as a British Overseas Territories citizen, or if you are a citizen and need to replace your lost or damaged certificate, complete the process at online.odg.gov.ky.
Do you have a passion for cake decorating or doing vegetable carvings? Register now to UCCI's Continuing Education Food Courses. In 10 weeks, students will learn how to bake and acquire various techniques in icing decoration or to turn fruits and vegetables into beautiful garnishes and bouquets. Classes start on January 18th.
Register now on our website at connect.ucci.edu.ky/register/short courses.
Or visit us from January 6th to the 12th for face-to-face registration.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne E. Banks, and you're tuning into our special CI Retro broadcast. I'm pleased to have in studio Mr. Loxley Banks and Miss Patricia Jackson Patino, now known as Miss Patricia Patino Langfit. Mr. Banks.
Yeah, well, we come to the second segment, recorded narrative on Christmas of yesteryear, and we hear about former modes of transportation between the districts. You know, there was very few cars on the island many, many years ago. You'll hear about the trade that was going on between Cayman and the outside world, the commerce, much more. And on this segment, you'll hear the voices which would include the late Mrs. Vida Marion Bawden, Dr. Roy McTaggart, and they were two of the main merchants here in Cayman, representing two of the main merchants here in Cayman at that time. And Mr. Harrington Green, who was a North Side fiddle player, and Mrs. Phoebe Spence, of course, from East End, and I guess not, she kind of shared East End and North Side, I do believe, and she was a historical that could tell you just about anything for the last, prior to when you would talk to her, probably 50 or 75, 80 years, because she had brought forth many stories that she had been told by her parents. So we'll go to that insert right now.
And did the people in East End have to travel to Georgetown to buy material, or could they, the fabric for making the clothes, or could they get it right in the district?
Yeah, they could. When I grew up, they could get it right in the district.
Travel in those days, what it was like, everything was walking or horseback.
Yeah, walking. You walk where anytime you want to go East End, all the girls get ready, dressed, gone East End. That was nothing. That was like fun along the road. They're about walking, talking, gone.
How did you get to North Side?
We walked there too. Sometimes I had horse. If could get enough horse, would get on the horse and ride now. So I could ride horse, and children always ask, Granny, you can ride horse? Yes, I can ride horse.
I bet you can still do it.
Yeah, I can still do it now.
And of course, in those days, there were no roads, no cars, and so I'm told that people had to ride to Georgetown to do Christmas shopping, or go through the North Sound in boats.
Oh, yes, everybody. I won't say everybody, but some people had big boats. My father had a big boat, and usually it was my older sister, Iva, who is now the librarian, and she was the one who always got the opportunity to go into town to do the little Christmas shopping. My mother didn't do anything like that, so she did the little Christmas shopping.
Yes, that's right. We used to go through the Sound, because we at that time we had no horse, so we had to use boat to go to Georgetown to do your Christmas shopping. Those that had horse could ride it, but we didn't have a horse, so we had to do it by boat.
Who were the people in this district of North Side that had the boats that I understand people used to book passages on them just to be sure they got there to get their Christmas shopping done?
Well, your grandfather, Jack Miller, had a good boat. The McCoys, they had a big boat that they used to use, and the Chisholm down outside, and we used to get our passage sure that with them that we was make sure we was all ready to be there for Christmas.
I guess it was almost like going to another island.
It sure was.
Mrs. Bawden, what was Christmas like, say, 40 years ago? You were the youngest member of the island's leading merchants at that time, H.R. Marin and Company. Shedden Road certainly was the hub of activity, especially at Christmas time. Shoppers came from all over the island to converge in that area where, as I said, you had a shopping complex and Dr. Roy across the way.
Right.
Tell me something about that. What was it like?
That was like Broadway in New York at that time. Everybody congregated there. And I remember, too, when even boats, small boats, used to come from West Bay to Georgetown, while others came from, North Side, through the North Sound, and those from East End came by horseback, and bicycles. Actually, the hub was right on Shedden Road, between our old Shedden Road supermarket and what is now known as, I think, Columbus's building.
40 or 50 years ago, as far as the commercial business in the island is concerned, the only stores we had, more or less, was Marin's and mine, of McTaggart, situated there on Shedden Road. And it was a very, very busy week or time. That is, the week before Christmas. And it was the greatest pleasure in the world for the householders, the women, to get out and come around look the shops over and see what they wanted, and then Christmas Eve, brother, you couldn't tear through the crowds that were in front of those two stores. In other words, that was the main attraction for the whole island, I must say. They came from out of town, and they just congregated around Marion's and McTaggart's store. Oh, of course, they were buying goods.
They were in and out of both.
In and out both.
Comparing prices, I guess.
Well, more or less, but sometimes Marion's, I suppose, had more than I did, and sometimes I had what Marion's didn't have. So they, as you said, they had to go from one to the other. But
comparatively speaking, business was good. However, the population was considerably smaller, the mode of life more simple, and there was much less money in circulation. But all the merchants were busy preparing for Christmas, some of us as early as September.
What kind of lines of merchandise did Marion's carry then?
Dorian, I would say basically the same. For example, we always had a full line of groceries, excluding chilled and frozen merchandise, although we brought in potatoes, onions, and cabbage, and merchandise that could stand, say, 2 or 3 days without being in a chiller. But we also handled fabric, shoes, hosiery, hats, patent medicines, hardware, certainly including bicycles and tricycles. We used to say years ago, because we had the sub-agency for Ford Motor Company out of Jamaica, and then we had the agency for the Studebaker Company from the United States, we said we handled from pins to cars.
You also had building supplies as well.
Yes, indeed. We always imported corrugated steel sheets, or commonly known as zinc, from England, and of course galvanized nails and barbed wire, staples, and that type of merchandise.
You name it.
mine was a general store. I had grocers in there, and I had shoes upstairs, and hats upstairs, and dresses upstairs, and downstairs on the east side was where I kept all of my piece goods. You know, in those days we were able to get a lot of cloth from Japan, and we had to order in large quantities. The result that we were able to undersell what you could get from Jamaica.
That's very interesting.
And of course, the people realized that we were getting what they wanted at a price that suited them more or less, so that we were able to cut prices over the Jamaica prices just by ordering it direct from Japan ourselves, Marion and ourselves.
Dr. Roy, for a pound or two, as pounds in those days, what could people buy?
In those days, a pound went, I think, sometimes farther than a pound today, by far, because the prices and goods were so very much cheaper than what they are at the time.
But you could get a pair of shoes, I imagine, for a pound.
Oh, yes, quite easily, sometimes less than that. It depends on the quality you wanted. Of course, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I bought my shoes direct from New York. I'd make sometimes periodic visits up there and buy exactly what I want, and otherwise a salesman would come down and we could make our selection, so that we didn't have to buy anything from Jamaica in that respect at all.
Well, I'm sure that some of our younger people could never imagine that ladies' shoes ranged from, say, 5 shillings to 10 shillings per pair. Men's shoes would range from 15 shillings to £1 per pair, while children's shoes were extremely inexpensive, say 2 shillings to 3 shillings a pair.
And even in those days, you imported shoes from as far away as Italy, I believe.
That's right, although they, at that time, most of them came from the United States, but we did have direct importation from Italy. And speaking of you know, prices of merchandise, I could certainly mention fabrics. There were fabrics that we sold from 3 pennies per yard to dress fabrics up to 2 shillings and 3 shillings per yard. Khaki material used chiefly for men and boys was sold from 1 9 to 2 shillings, and blue denim at about 1 6 per yard. I might also mention, speaking about materials, we used to purchase men's suiting from England many years ago, and it was sold well at that time, but of course in this day and age everyone likes to buy ready-made clothing.
Mm-hmm. But in those days, everyone made their own clothing. Most families made their own clothing, men and women.
Yes, that is correct. The ladies and sometimes we would have the men also, but most of the ladies did the sewing in those days.
Now, the types of food certainly have changed over the years. We have such variety today. What were some of the more famous brands that you carried in those days?
Well, we had quite a lot of grocers and cans as well as raw material like cassava and yams and potatoes, and we had a lot of onions and so forth and so on, you know, just what they would need. And the stores were well stocked, more or less, particularly at that time of the year.
Well, I guess most of these provisions would have been grown on the island, brought in from the outer districts to be put in the stores.
Well, you know, North Side was very good at cultivating because they used to bring a lot of cassava and yams and potatoes from North Side to sell in town. Of course, nothing like that, more or less, is done in Georgetown.
And how late did you stay open? The stores stay open, say, on Christmas Eve or during Christmas week in those days?
We had later hours even than we have now. We rarely went home on Christmas Eve until after 12, unless Sunday was following. We always were certain that we were home by Sunday morning, before 1 o'clock or before 12:30. But the hours were later than they now are.
And that meant getting home and being ready for church next morning as well.
That is quite correct. That is true.
And welcome back to Talk Today. That was a special CI Retro segment featuring Mrs. Vita Marin-Bodden, Dr. Roy McTaggart, Mr. Harrington Green, and Miss Phoebe Spence. Mr. Banks, if you don't mind, let's go to our commercial break. When we come back, we'll discuss the segment on shopping in Cayman. Back with more Talk Today right after this.
Christmas may be a little different this year, but it will taste as jolly good as ever with KFC. Whether it's an office party, holiday fete, or family gathering, enjoy KFC's delicious, fresh, hand-breaded chicken. The KFC Festive Feast includes 10 pieces of original recipe or spicy chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, tasty coleslaw, biscuits, and a 2-liter Pepsi. KFC's holiday catering menu includes buckets of hot wings, sweet chili wings, or chicken tenders. KFC, it's good.
Your Radio Cayman 7 a.m. news, brought to you by Cayman National, proudly serving the Cayman Islands since 1974. Visit www.caymannational.com for up-to-date information for all your financial needs and follow us on social media.
The Cayman Islands government would like to remind the public that e-services are available for vehicle license renewal, trade and business licensing, police clearance, and other transactions. Skip the line and apply online. E-services are user-friendly, efficient, and most important, you can apply and pay from the comfort of your home. Visit eservices.gov.ky.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Sterling Dwayne Ebanks, and we have our special CI Retro broadcast. I'm very pleased to have in studio Mr. Loxley Banks and Miss Patricia Patino Langfit. Mr. Banks, before the break, we listened to the segment on buying around Christmas and the transport amongst the districts without roads, without cars, and strictly by horseback and boat across the Sound.
Well, that's just the way it was, you know. It wasn't easy back in those days, and you know, they mentioned that that hub there, which the Marion store is still there, and semblance of the other stores still there. That was the hub of commerce, really, in Georgetown. There were some other stores, you know, small stores scattered around Georgetown, as well as there was some small stores in West Bay. But you know, the trade that they were able to establish back in those days, direct trade with Japan, direct trade with Italy. And he mentioned, you know, salesmen from New York would come down here. Well, you know, coming from New York to Cayman was probably a 45, 60-day journey. You got on a gold field and she made it here in 2 days, and then she might not. She might have took her 10 days to get here from Tampa. So it was, but, you know, and that's just a
It's it's an impressive. I'm trying to work out the logistics in my head. We were talking in the break about everything was done by post. There was no
Right.
internet back then to make the shopping from Japan a breeze. And you think about a salesman traveling from New York and spending that length of time traveling for. Granted, he's going to stop in numerous jurisdictions around the way, but the logistics to actually go through that process, get here, go through the order of all the material, go back to New York, find out what's actually in stock, then ship it down.
And I was just talking to Mr. Owen Farrington. He was telling me that at Christmas time, my mother used to tell us about waiting for the Goldfield to come to West Bay because it would actually come to the dock in West Bay. And he was saying that at that time, they would try to get a little bit more pocket money to buy things for Christmas. And he would sell baskets of oranges because his grandfather had orchards with oranges. But he was saying one of the things that the shopkeepers would pay the boys to go help unload the Goldfield.
Oh, yeah.
And they would borrow wheelbarrows and, hand trucks, and they would go unload the Goldfield and bring it to the shopkeepers so they'd get paid to do that. Then they have a little pocket change, but, that's...
Yeah.
What they did, they discharged the cargo for Georgetown and the other eastern districts in Georgetown, right down at where the dock is there now. And the West Bay cargo, they would discharge in West Bay in catboats, loaded from the Goldfield because they couldn't come to
shore.
Yeah, loaded from the Goldfield into catboats and then bring it ashore.
The smaller vessels.
Yeah, right on the beach down there in Henning Beach. That was, when the Goldfield would come in, there was nothing but cartoons of whatever you want to think, and beans and rice and all that kind of stuff. I made a few shillings myself, hauling.
See, there you go.
Hauling sacks of I think with beans up to some of the merchants.
A jack of all trades you were. How old are you when you make?
I left there when I was 15 years old, so it was probably somewhere between 9 and 14, 15, and all of the fuel, and we mentioned fuel. Mostly it was kerosene, came in 50-gallon drums, and they would bring them ashore in the catboats, and they would have to turn the catboat over. They would have to, in other words, because you couldn't pick up a 50-gallon drum full of kerosene.
No, I was going to say, sure.
So they'd have to turn the catboat over when they got to the beach. And then we'd roll the drums up on the beach, and they all had names on them where they were going.
Can you imagine 50 gallons of kerosene just so you could have it in your lamps, etc.?
Yeah.
I remember my mother telling me that my grandmother had paid for her electricity poles, and she was so excited. And I think she passed away in 1965 before they even put the poles in at her house in West Bay in Bottomanu.
Oh, wow.
So she never even saw it.
She never saw the poles.
No.
Just I'm still imagining Mr. Banks as a 9-year-old kid just rolling those drums. And then
that was a lot of exercise.
And then standing away for the shilling, right?
Yeah.
We didn't need gyms in those days.
No.
You were hauling bags of rice and beans, and
and
that's what he was saying too.
And in each of the districts, there were little stores.
Sure.
But they purchased the bulk of their stuff, probably from the Marins and Dr. Roy. But then they got direct orders also from Tampa, because the Goldfield had, I guess, in today's vernacular, would have been a business captain, but they called him the supercargo back in those days. And everybody would go to him and give him their order. And another aspect, was the foreign exchange. Now, how do you get dollars to pay for it? And that's where it all had to be done. But my father and his cousin, Prentice Powell, they operated a little merchandising store in West Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Prentice told me that they had an open account with the J.P. Coates company in New Jersey. J.P. Coates was one of the biggest textile companies in the world at that time. And they had an open account with them. if they they had telegraph, Dada did it. If they sent them a telegram, said, send me, and you heard it mention denim, which was a very, a lot of, especially men's clothes were made from denim,
Yeah.
Send me 500 yards of denim. It was on the next train out for Miami or Tampa to come to Cayman.
See, that's impressive to me.
But a lot of the exchange, they had a little government bank. In fact, the government bank stood almost right on the same premise that we're in here today. And I think they could get some foreign exchange. But the bulk of the foreign exchange back in those days came from the seafarers sending checks back, and most of them send their money back home in U.S. Treasury or it was called post office money orders, and that was like cash.
That was the equivalent.
They just endorsed it to the merchant. The merchant would send it off to J.P. Coates or wherever in Del Monte or whoever and pay for their goods.
I love the logistical planning of how it all worked out. Pre-internet, pre-phones, and they made it work. I love it.
Exactly.
On that note, we do have to go to our 1 p.m. headline news. Before we go, though, when I heard Mr. McTaggart talking about the crowds that were milling in front of his store on Christmas Eve, my first thought was Black Friday sales, and I was like, I wonder if there's any fights back in that day between the customers in front of McTaggart's store.
Well, believe me, there were traffic there. There were little joshing going on.
It was a big deal to go to Marin's store. I mean, like I said, there
no.
were shops that my mother said they went to in West Bay. But if you got into town, it was a big deal to go to the Marin store or McTaggart's store.
No, that was that's like going to Rockefeller Center back in New York, right?
It was a very big deal.
On that note, let's go to our 1 p.m. headline news. We'll be back with more Talk Today and our special CI Retro broadcast right after this.
Follow Radio K-Man on Twitter. All the latest information, breaking news, community events, and more. Follow us at twitter.com/Radio K-Man.
Today's biggest news.
Radio K-Man.
It's only 2 species that we have on the island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio K-Man's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. The 22-year-old man who was arrested on suspicion of murder after he turned himself over to the police on Saturday, December 26th, for the stabbing of 22-year-old Michael Aaron Bush of West Bay on December 24th, has been charged with murder. He is expected to appear in court today. In international news, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris received the first dose of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine live on television on Tuesday in Washington, D.C., and urged Americans to get vaccinated for COVID-19. A statue of Breonna Taylor, an African-American woman who was shot dead by police during a raid on her home in March, has been smashed in California. It happened 2 weeks after the bust was erected in the city of Oakland. Sculptor Leo Carson called the destruction an act of racist aggression. He said he would rebuild the piece in bronze. Russia's deputy prime minister has revealed more than 80% of excess deaths this year are linked to COVID-19, which would mean its death toll is 3 times higher than previously reported. Official figures say 55,827 people have died with COVID in Russia. The deputy prime minister says excess deaths would take that to 186,000. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
For the latest in news and information,
Follow Radio K-Man on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio K-Man app or log on to our website, radiokman.gov.ky.
your voice, your choice, your radio.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio K-Man's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you are just tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks, and pleased to be featuring our special CI Retro episode today. And in studio with me is Mr. Loxley Banks, along with Miss Patricia Patino Langfit. Now, Miss Patricia, we've been focusing this whole show on Christmas and the Christmas traditions here in Cayman, and just how the different portions of Christmas, whether it be the segment we had before, which was the shopping and the transportation around the islands. But yourself, you've lived abroad as well. Talk to us a bit about your experiences with Christmas abroad.
Well, so interesting, but my family, the Jacksons and the Coes, had been here 250 years. And I was actually the first generation born in our family off the island. And so in Port Arthur, Texas. And what's really interesting about that is that there's probably more original Caymanians in Port Arthur, Texas than there are here now, or at least a good amount.
Sure, yeah.
And it was because, they were all seafarers, and that was the largest seaport area at the time, the Port Arthur, Houston, and the Port Arthur was a boomtown. So men who would go off to sea would start bringing their families. And so my uncle, Nathan E. Banks, and then brought his wife, who was my Aunt Bess, and then she later got my mother, Mary, to come, visit her, and the mother ended up staying there. But so there's this massive amount of Caymanians there. So when I was growing up, I really didn't think anything else except that we were Caymanian, because we were always around Caymanians. I mean, it was, Eldon Bodden and Brenda and the Hydes and the, you name it, the Howells. I can think about it. Everybody there that I was around was Caymanian. And they all brought their culture and tradition with them. So we had the same things. We had the same music. We had the same dancing. We had the same heavy cakes. We had everything that I know about Cayman, and I was being brought here ever since I was a child to visit my grandmother, etc. But everything that I knew in Cayman was the same thing as I knew in Port Arthur. And I think that was probably one of the most remarkable things, is that they transported their culture and were able to keep it alive for a very, very long time. I haven't been back in a while, but even during when I was Miss Cayman, we were having for many years these Cayman nights
in Port Arthur.
In Port Arthur, and we'd bring barefoot, and we'd all get on the plane and go to Port Arthur. And I thought, how funny is that? That here we are in Cayman, exporting ourselves to where I grew up in Port Arthur, because the culture was there. And we would have these huge Cayman nights and Cayman parties in the Civic Center. It was in the Civic Center. That's how many people we had the Civic Center full. You should ask George Nowak when he's in here next time. Talk to Barefoot and ask him. Remember going to Port Arthur for Cayman nights. So we had that. We had that culture.
It was a big deal going. A lot of Caymanians went up there to celebrate with the Caymanians up in Port Arthur, and a lot of this same activity type was going on in Tampa and in Miami, and some of the other big seaports, Mobile and New Orleans.
Exactly.
So I think those folks who actually moved away to U.S., most of them, and there were some that went over across the pond to UK, but they seem to have taken better care of the Caymanian culture than a lot of us who stay around here. And
it's impressive.
Maybe because they had to hang on to it so dearly.
Yes. That's just it, right? It was a rarity at that point, because you were clinging to whatever you could at that point when you start traveling. And do they still have the Cayman nights up in Port Arthur?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. But I know they did for many.
Oh yeah, for many years, probably 15, 20
Yeah.
years. Cayman night in Port Arthur. Yeah.
It's impressive how the Cayman diaspora really just spread across all of the port towns and kept that vibrancy going throughout the years. And
they used to have they call it in the Tampa area, Caymanian picnic.
Yeah, exactly.
Down in I forget what park, Lowry Park, I think.
I think you're right.
They took over Lowry.
Because my Uncle Paul and Aunt Bess used to live in Tampa.
Took over Lowry Park for the Cayman picnic.
One of the things that my family did, it was interesting because a lot of Caymanians couldn't get the fresh plantains and bread kind, etc. So my father actually started a company called the Patino International Trade Company, and was importing all the bread kind and stuff. And he was getting a lot of things through New Orleans. It would come from South America, etc., in the Caribbean, and go through New Orleans, and it'd be shipped to us. And we basically had a shop that Caymanians could come and get plantain, cassava, fresh bread kind, things like that. We did that for you in Port Arthur.
In Port Arthur.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of people from Port Arthur who's actually were born or grew up there, and they came back here, because I run into them all the time. And so I'm sure you've got callers here that would admit that.
It's an impressive one.
Yeah, it's as I said, they took care of the culture. In fact, you mentioned Brenda and
Eldon.
They're still. I believe they're still up there.
Yeah, they are.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, see, there's Caymanians they can get, and
Yes.
going over their house was like stepping into Cayman when I was a kid.
So who played the music at Christmas time?
Everybody did. Everybody did.
Yeah.
Everybody had music. Everybody. It was amazing.
And most of the seamen, you see, they could pick out a few chords on a guitar. And
No, we've discussed that before with the musical
yes,
elements of the seafarers.
And they had fiddles and, talk about rosin up the bow. And
yeah.
So I was talking, there was another memory that Owen had, and he was saying when he was a kid that most of the men would get together with musical instruments, and they would go from house to house, and they would get a piece of heavy cake. And he said, he remember one night he was going to bed, and it was late, because what she'd just said on the recording that it was sometimes midnight. So he said he was going to bed, and he said his mother was putting out plates, and he said, what are you doing? And she said, well, the marcher is going to be coming by, and, it could be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, so I want to have it ready when they come by to give them a piece of heavy cake.
And we have some reference to that coming up in some of the segments coming up.
Perfect.
Well, let's jump right into that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we're going into it, Christmas remembrances, and in this segment, we'll expose you to kitchen dances, marching at Christmas, bad words. Now, bad words. It was a kind of phrase that you didn't want to hear somebody say to you, especially children. Now, don't say those bad words. Don't say those bad words. And of course, the seafarers coming home, usually on a gold field, because the gold field was a lifeline, especially during the war years between 1938, I guess, 1945, between here and the U.S., Tampa. Was her main port. And of course the church activities, the gaiety and joyfulness, music and more. So we'll have that insert right now. The Fox is ready for it.
It was very joyful, and everybody looked forward to Christmas because it meant everything, a new beginning, and dresses and everything. All the older men, the grown men, they began to march from around, say, 10 o'clock Christmas Eve, and they marched until maybe midday on Christmas Day, and then I suppose they had some drinks, but nothing drunk. Nobody was drunk. Everybody was just happy. And the first time I recall, the men marched on horses, followed by music, which was accordion, gradle, and drum, and they had a glorious time with crowds of people following them.
Yes, the men of the island, sometimes for as long as about 3 weeks to a month before Christmas, they would get together round about just after sundown, and they would start a march throughout Georgetown. They would have their fiddle and their drum and sometimes an accordion and a greeter, and they would go along marching and shouting hip, 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 hooray every now and again. And of course there were only 1 or 2 motor cars about the road in those days, so they had all the room that they wanted to march. And then on Christmas morning they would go around to each one of the houses. There would be dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And I always remember waiting for them to come because it got me awake, and I used to like to hear their music, and I used to like to hear them say, hip hip hooray, hip hip hooray.
You mentioned getting a little drum. I think in talking a little while earlier, you said that one thing the children in Georgetown did was to have their own march.
This took place on the Christmas Day in the afternoon. A number of us, maybe 25, 30, sometimes as many as about 40 of us, would get together, and we would march through Georgetown. If we had balloons, we would have a few of them in the air. If there were any flags, we would be waving them that Santa brought. If there were any drums, they would be making as much noise as possible. Any rattles, anything that could make noise, beating pans and so on. And I remember that we used to go up to the commissioner's residence, the old government house, which was burned down a few years ago, and we gathered together near to the porch, and he used to come out and he used to throw down pennies for us. And there were many buckheads, as we used to call them, as we were trying as we were trying to pick them up, we ran into one another and fell down and turned over one another, but it was great fun. And sometimes I would manage to get as many as 3, and I felt very rich.
I would imagine so in those days.
Well, I remember 40, 50 years ago when my old Uncle Nicodemus and them used to begin to get ready for Christmas. They all make ready with drums and violins and go marching in the nighttime and have a lot of fun with each other.
What kind of marching was this? This was carol singing or just music through the roads or what?
Well, we go marching through the road with the music from Old Man Bay right down to the north side to everybody home, you know, looking around and having a good time and singing Christmas carols to each other.
And just about everybody in the community joined in this, I guess.
Yeah, just about everybody in the community joined in these social affairs.
Speaking of this, I'm going to get immediately to what some people have described as the kitchen dances that used to be held. Would you tell me about those?
Well, we used to have a lot of kitchen dances too. I remember that clearly. And Christmas Day, we would always go to church in the beginning. After church, then we would move down to the big north side, Albert Ebank's place, where we used to have our Christmas dance, starting from 1 o'clock in the day till the next morning, having all kind of fun, cakes and drinks and eats, and everything goes with it.
What kind of music did you use in those days? What did you have? I mean, today we have all kinds of bands and groups and combos and you name it. What did you have to use?
Well, we just had a drum, violin, and a pair of old grater. That's all we used in them days.
Okay, Mr. Green, let's have a sample of the music you did in those days. Let's listen to it.
Sometimes it was in the kitchen and dining room, you know, and sometimes it was in the living room, you know. In those days, people had half the house was the living room.
Right.
And those dances would start from 12 o'clock in the day and 2 o'clock in the day and all that, you know, Christmas time. But I mean, all like me, when we went, we had to go all afternoon. We were allowed to go with one of the brothers, and then
back home at a certain time.
we had to be back by 9 o'clock. And that was our fun for Christmas.
We always had dances that lasted all day. I remember a neighbor of ours, Mr. Johnny Eden Rivers, the father of Mrs. Anne Sapanton. Every Christmas Day, he had his dance beginning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it lasted maybe till next day. And everybody was happy together. No drinking those days, just everybody eating and dance all day. It was most joyful.
I had an old uncle, McGuffin. He was a real old dancer and had one big old house. And he used to make all kind of dances from after the church let out know that they had danced until the morning. But no limit, you can dance till morning. But wasn't nothing much to drink now. Yeah, they used to have a little, but nobody got high to saying bad words or anything, but they danced until the broad morning.
And the girls stayed there with them.
Yeah, the girls stayed right there till morning. Some put on you shouldn't dance all night till the morning.
That's a good one. That's a lot of dancing.
Yeah, that's a lot of dancing. That's what they used to do. They had low dance. All kind of nice dance.
Was nothing but fiddle and drums. Of course, anybody knows that a violin is the sweetest music still in the world, I believe. And that was accompanied by a drum and a good drummer and a greater scrape to keep up the time. And those days they could really dance the real dances. Take the 8-hand polka, the waltz and what have you. These days they don't even hardly touch their partners. They just get off, then shake up and down a little bit, and that's it.
Everybody knew everybody in those days, and they were all so sociable, you know, and having a good time. And it was a pleasant, a delight, rather, just to watch them, you know, congregating and laughing and talking and hooray and so on, you know. They really spent a Christmas evening, particularly.
And there was a lot of activities around the church.
Yes, that's quite true. You never forgot our church.
That leads me to my next question, and that is that families were very close-knit in those days.
Yes, fathers were usually away at sea, and every December, come what may, they were sure to be home for Christmas. And all the family went to church on Christmas Day. They were all dressed in their best things on Christmas Day. And we spent the entire day having real fun with the family. When church was over, we sat and talked together, and we ate together, and we loved each other, and we visited all our friends and families, and we were all like a great big family.
Christmas really meant eating, drinking, laughing, visiting, and going to church. Now that was a must. You didn't have Christmas unless you went to church. You see, today there are so many diversions. There's this and that and the other thing to take up attention. But in those days, you just had to make Christmas by getting together, and the families visited one another. Christmas time was a time for visiting. People who hadn't seen one another for a long time would remember, well, on Christmas Day I must go and see that person, or see cousin, or auntie, or uncle.
Well, it was a very happy time for myself and I would say the others of my family, and indeed for most of the young boys and girls in Cayman. We used to look forward for Christmas and count the days from about the 1st of July, to tell you the truth. And it seems so far away. And I do remember, too, before I finish, that we always look forward to go with our parents on Christmas Day to church. That was something that we looked forward to, and then after that, there was a special meal that was prepared for Christmas Day with the whole family together. It was a lovely thing.
Yes. I think that was about the paramount thought of everyone. In those days, early days, my father was a Presbyterian, while my mother worshipped with what was then known as the Holiness Church, and now later known as the Church of God. Some of the children would accompany my father to the Presbyterian church, while some of us would go to the Holiness Church with Mom. But by and large, the buildings were usually as crowded, I think, as they could be, taking into consideration our small population. The churches were very definitely, the place to go at Christmas time.
Oh yes, we always had a sacred concert. We had the Sunday school children and the church people had parts. Well, when I was young, your Aunt Miss Alice,
yes,
and Uncle Claudia,
yes,
they were the two who always got the concerts together when I was a girl. And
they were rehearsing for weeks?
Oh yes, and we knew our parts perfectly too. And we were happy, we were glad to go to practice and do that. We looked forward to that when Christmas was coming. And then, well, of course, in those days, I wasn't big enough then to having a part in the secular concerts. Mm-hmm. But they had secular concerts. But when I got bigger then, a big teenager then, we all had parts in secular concerts. And it was something we looked forward to.
And people looked forward to it for years. And more than that, we enjoyed going to church and commemorating our Lord's birthday. And we had good, wonderful programs, pantomimes, dialogues, recitations, and Christmas songs. And our young people were so much more willing to perform in those days. It was at that time that our men who went to sea would try to come home, and there was a real family reunion. They'd bring back some candies and things that they knew the family would enjoy, where nowadays that isn't the case.
One final question. Do you think that today a lot of the Christ has gone out at Christmas, so to speak? Do you think a lot of that is missing today?
Yes, a lot of it is missing. I know right in my district, every married man that had a family find himself in church on Christmas Day and and every Sunday, a married man sitting in church with his family, setting example for the children what don't happen in these days.
And you think that's part of what's gone wrong today?
That is what's going wrong with the children, for the lack of parents not training the children. They don't show them the house of God.
Well, a lot of meat in that segment.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and some of the voices, new voices that you heard in that segment was Mrs. Annie Hildebarden, Mr. Ernest, and of course Miss Bowman there came in, Reverend Ruth Bowman, and I think Mr. Jerry Bodden was also in there, and Miss Genevieve Bodden also. Church activities, and you know, they mentioned Sunday school, and I think in a lot of the districts, I think most of the churches sort of still maintain that tradition. I know the church that I attend in West Bay, they had a wonderful Christmas program with the children. I mean, they had them up there as young as 3 and 4 years old, reciting poems or parts from memory, not looking at anything, just get up there and belt it out, you know. And I think in many of the churches in the various districts have still maintain that kind of tradition. So it's you know, they talked about the Christmas dances. Mention was made. They start 7 o'clock in the morning and go right through to the next day and up the next evening.
With a few pair of shoes.
And dance your shoes off.
Dance the shoes off. And no bad words spoken.
But curfews were in place, right?
Well, for some of the ladies, yes.
Well, just the celebrating of the
Sure.
seafarers and men coming home and the families being able to get together.
No, absolutely.
It was just like a continuous celebration.
So how long were the seafarers home for if they were home for Christmas?
Well, some of them, I can just tell you from my experience, my father would usually try to come home end of October. Sometimes he would like to get home the 1st of October, because back in those days, more or less, you thought that the hurricane season was after the sun crossed the line, and that's in September through November. And many of the men would try to be home for what was perceived as the hurricane season.
Sure.
But usually, and then they would leave to go back, maybe the last part of February. And that was the term that they used, to cut the winter, because they didn't want to, or they wanted to minimize their time being out at sea and the winter storms and so forth. So they'd go back down middle of February, 1st of March, and catch another ship and go off for 6, 7, 8 months, and depending on where they were at, come October, November, they'd start making their way home, try to make their way home.
Impressive.
And they'd bring some goodies with them.
I heard about the candies that were brought back with them.
Yeah. And music.
And the music.
Yeah. And back in those days, it was the old Slate 78 record.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you dropped that,
they were thick.
Yeah.
Because we had some of those.
Yeah. If you dropped it, it went in 15 different pieces. So it was, and how they got...
And they were heavy.
Yeah, yes, how they got them from wherever they would bring them from back to Cayman whole. You know, sometimes I have to, when I think about it, I say, wow, you know, they really took care to make sure they brought the music home.
Of course. Now on Christmas Day, were you out as part of the kid marches yourself?
How was that?
Were you out with the kid marches on Christmas Day? I heard that segment about kid marches.
Not really, you know, but I remember as I think Patricia mentioned, I think it was in the last segment or maybe in between segment, where I remember my father at night, especially Christmas night and New Year's night, because the marching was done over New Year's, so the New Year's days also, he'd always have something for them to drink, and usually it was a little strong drink that, you know, he'd say, "No, don't take too much of it, Jess." You know? And my mother would have some cakes or something, you know, and they would come. Usually, I remember one night they were late in coming. And I think we had all gone to bed. And they stood out in our house. Our house, the front door was 10 feet from the main road at that time. And they stood out there playing. And I remember hearing my father say, well, I think we better go out there and give them something because they were going to play until you came out.
Which is why Owen's mother had the plates out.
Yes.
So she wouldn't have to get up in the night to do it. They could just take it.
So when did that whole marching kind of phase out? Like how long ago was it that marching element to Christmas culture kind of phase out?
There were, and I believe in each district, I would say, until the early 70s.
Okay.
There was usually 2 or 3 of the old seafarers, and they'd rent a truck, get somebody with a truck, and they'd go, and some of them went all over the island, playing their drums, and all Christmas night, all night long, and New Year's Eve, especially, and New Year's Day.
It'd be nice to see the resurfacing of this. Like that's going to be a really novel element to Christmas that you haven't seen. And
well,
it's kind of the same idea of caroling,
yes,
going
exactly.
back and forth. Because he was saying that, Owen was saying that they did Christmas songs so they ran out and they would sing whatever they wanted to sing.
Yeah.
Just the idea of being joyous and singing
and spreading the joy around. Because there was lots of some shut-ins, and I guess they'd really raise their spirit. They come by there and sing a little Christmas song for them.
Play a little jig.
And then the firecrackers, fireworks, because even Owen mentioned that. He would say, they would have a little pocket change to go get some fire rockets.
That was a big thing, and there was one gentleman, one seafarer, Earl Hydes. When he came home at Christmas, he brought home cartoons of firecrackers because he was a big firecracker fan, and he'd give it out to all everybody, especially most of the children, kids that want these firecrackers. And sometimes he'd come down right into the little square in West Bay, right now where the 4-way, right at the 4-way stop there, and he'd bring down. I don't know, the firecrackers is usually in little stacks, where maybe 50 or 20 of them together, or 100, and he'd just light the whole pack and throw it out in the middle of the street.
You mean the Chinese firecrackers?
Yeah, the long ones all attached together.
Yeah. Those are always fun. It can be annoying if you're a neighbor trying to sleep, but yeah. On that note, let's go to our 1:30 commercial break and come back. We'll be exploring more of CI Retro's Christmas special.
Yeah, and when we come back, we're going to be having a segment from our friends over there in Cayman Brack, and this is an opportunity for some of you folks over there to give us a call. This segment will only be 2 minutes long, so you can call us, in the next 6 minutes, and tell us a little bit about your celebrations in Cayman Brack. But the segment that you'll hear after the commercials, of course, is about a young lady who was celebrating Christmas and reciting her part in the Christmas song, or Christmas celebration.
Well said. On that note, let's go to our 1:30 commercial break.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best and sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
The holidays wouldn't be the same without a little boom from Fireworks Limited. Cayman's biggest firework discount megastore is now open behind Massive Equipment in Industrial Park. Fireworks Limited has a megastore full of new fireworks and offers huge volume discounts. Stock up early and save big with free gifts with every purchase and the biggest variety of products on island. Fireworks Limited is behind Massive in Industrial Park with tons of parking.
Open until 6 p.m. every night and 9 p.m. on December 24th, 29th, and 31st.
Williams Production presents Cayman's Finest in Concert in support of Loud Silent Voices, featuring the Williams Quartet, Darnell Celestine, Jamie Ebanks, Vashti and Angelique Hurlston, Omar Walters, Jaden Hanna, Rachel Latta, and others from across Cayman. Thursday, December 31st at 6:30 p.m. First Baptist Church, Crew Road. Admission, $15. Tickets available at Funky Tanks and Christian Enlightenment Center. Brought to you by the Office of the Premier, Ministry of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing, the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport, Burger King, Praise 87.9 FM, Hydes and Sons, Health City Cayman Islands, Cayman First, DMS Organization, and Radio Cayman.
Dream a little dream with this year's holiday sale at Powerhouse Gym, King Sports Center. Get Fit 2021 sale from December 15th to January 15th. 2-for-1 Powerhouse Gym memberships for $650 or single memberships for $350. The perfect Christmas gift or New Year's resolution. Gift certificates are available. Call 946-5464 or visit www.kingsportscenter.com. King Sports Center, providing your fitness, recreation, and relaxation needs. Remember, fit is not a destination, it is a way of life.
The road to becoming a British Overseas Territories citizen just became a lot smoother. You can now apply online at online.odg.gov.ky. If you or someone you know needs to be naturalized or registered as a British Overseas Territories citizen, or if you are a citizen and need to replace your lost or damaged certificate, complete the process at online.odg.gov.ky.
Tips to stay safe this holiday season. Take the pledge. Plan a safe ride home. Offer to be a designated driver. Ride the Purple Ribbon bus. Drink responsibly. Log on to ndc.ky for bus routes.
Arrive Alive 345. Take the pledge, designate a driver, or ride the Purple Ribbon bus on New Year's Eve. This message is brought to you by the National Drug Council and Radio Cayman.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks, and pleased to have in studio Mr. Loxley Banks and Miss Patricia Patino Langfit here with a special CI Retro Christmas special. Mr. Banks, before the break, we were talking about just the traditions that happen around Christmas time, from the marching and the importance of the church on Christmas Day itself, and we had briefly touched upon Cayman Brac.
Yeah, well, this next segment actually is from a lady in Cayman Brac who tells the story of what she did in 1930 for her Christmas part in the Christmas program that they were conducting over there. So let's go to that cut. This is from the National Archive Memory Bank, actually, and it was recorded by Heather McLaughlin. It's a very short cut, so you folks in the back, Brac, if you want to call in, give us a call right now.
One lady from Cayman Brac remembers clearly the recitation that she said years ago.
One time they had a meeting with 8 girls in that. Oh, and I can say it to you, always at the joyous season, happy praying class hand in hand, and in castle, house and cottage, pleasures ringing throughout the land. Putting all dull cares to flight, youth and age alike unite. Now while May bells are ringing, every gladsome heart is singing, welcome to the bright new year. Let me tell you something. It was 8 in that, in the year 30, and I don't want to lower.
You said that in 1930?
Yeah, and I was in the, we don't understand? Mm-hmm. And I don't know one lower.
You're the only one left of all of those people.
They might laugh me to punish, I tell them.
Yeah. So you said that at Christmas time, did you?
Yeah, Christmas time.
That was a Christmas program that you had?
Yeah, we were Now, this one is married to Bernard, you know. You see now, her 3 sisters was in with me.
I see. And you all said that together?
Yeah, it was 8 together. Now, it was another Hebe, but she's dead. There was a girl named Ethel, she's dead. But it's only me and one other girl, Phoebe, she's in the States. 2 alive out of them now. Me and her, she's same age as me, but she's in the States, of course. But I don't know that was... Let me tell you, everyone else was dressed in white.
Oh, so you all had special clothes to wear.
And we fixed the beads across the neck. Yeah.
What color were the beads?
Pink.
Pink beads. And that was a necklace, or was it sewn to your dress?
Sewn on the dress.
Oh. So that was very pretty.
Yeah, it was pretty.
Yeah. How long were the skirts?
Skirts around knees.
And you had, did they have long sleeves?
Yeah. Oh, this is a ready-made dress. There was sewn something. This is a ready-made dress.
Yes, that's very pretty.
Well, very pretty. And you hear about, all those clothes had to be made. They were made, by their mothers or sisters. All by hand with one of those big old Singer sewing machines, which, and some of those, you had to
treble ones, yeah.
Yeah, you had to crank it with one hand and guide whatever you're sewing. But then some of them had the foot pedal.
Yeah. That's what we had. Yeah. My grandmother had the treadle.
Yeah, and to see them work, make all kind of, I know, and they were crochet. You remember Christmas crochet?
Oh yes.
Was a very entrenched tradition.
That was a big deal in my family.
Yes.
All the crocheting.
And how some of those, they could take a picture and look at this crochet, whatever you want to call it, model, and figure out, because doing crochet, there's a series of knots that you have to be quite efficient in to get all these patterns. And they could look at that picture and figure out what knot this should be and what knot should come next, Have you ever seen anyone doing crochet?
Because the patterns they were hard to come by.
Yeah,
Things were very hard to come by. Think about it. You couldn't get a pattern so you would see something and you just figure it out.
Try to replicate it.
I mean, trial and error a lot of times. Yeah. But I was talking about, crochet was huge, but also tatting. And I put this on, I forgot, on Facebook or something the other day, and somebody asked me about it. And tatting is actually, have you ever heard of tatting?
No.
It's actually like crochet, but it's made by tying knots. And instead of using a crochet hook, you use something that's kind of like a fish shape kind of thing, and it's called a shuttle.
Yeah.
And you would put it through and literally tie knots in order to make these very fine lace, and that's what these ladies did. And
let me just pipe in that goes back to and you mentioned the shuttle. That goes back to the turtleneck knitting, because that's how they use.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And they created this mini system from that.
Yeah.
And then apply that to
lace and clothing. They had to make everything by hand.
Sure.
And these are very fine, like looking lace that they would make with this.
And so the pink beads that the recording was referencing, the pink beads that were on her clothes, what were those? Just regular beads?
Just
or were those
beads.
Actually, okay.
Could have been beads, and it could have been a seed or something that they painted, or even there's some wild things around Cayman that one of them, I can't remember exactly what the name is from, but they're a little thing about the size of your thumbnail or half size of your thumbnail, red and black, and sometimes yellow in there. Beautiful.
And they could make their own from that.
Sure. It's impressive, because the level of creativity and the fact that everything was done by hand, right?
Well, and that was something that just made me remember my mother talking about, when they would come back, the men would come back and they'd bring things like, they call them glass head dolls, and I would assume it was like porcelain.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they would just bring the head. And so if they came back in September, October, and they would bring this, and then they had up until Christmas to be able to make the body and make the rest of the doll.
Okay.
In order to have a Christmas gift out of it.
Far different than
it was
how things have changed today, right?
Didn't come by Amazon.
Didn't come by Amazon. No. And it didn't even come complete.
No.
It came with a head. It was a chia pet that we actually created the rest of it, right? an impressive scenario. Again, anybody, any of our listeners out there in Cayman Brac, please do give us a call and feel free to share your memory of Christmas in Cayman Brac or in Little Cayman.
Yes. Well, it's going on all over the three islands. Christmas. There were a lot of preparation for Christmas all through the year.
Like the backing of the sand that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that everybody that I remember, and then everybody I've spoken to, is that's probably one of their biggest memories is going to back the sand and, bringing it up and turning it into piles. Usually, like around the 23rd, they do it and put it in piles on the yard.
Yeah.
And then on Christmas Eve, the very last thing you did was spread it.
And don't walk through it after
and
that.
then don't walk
And
through
then
it.
don't walk through it.
Yes.
Look at the finger.
Yeah, you don't
Was
walk
that your
through
mom
it.
giving you the
Exactly,
finger?
don't walk through it. Don't walk through it.
I had to think.
So it was fresh in the morning.
Yeah, I had to think just within the last couple of days, moonlight.
Yes.
And you might have.
That's right.
You might have heard it. It was mentioned on the promo for this program. Moonlight at Christmas time. Boy, that was a big thing. And a lot of romances was initiated in those sandbacking moonlight trips from the beach to the house, from the beach to the house to the beach.
Under that big romantic moon.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
But moonlight was big because they didn't have street lights, remember?
Sure, no, of course.
So everything was by the moon, and it was at its brightest at that time. So just kind of the idea of the moon on the new fallen snow. It was the moon on the new raked sand. Even Owen mentioned that the moonlight was so important because they didn't have any light.
And I think the full moon was last night or
tonight.
Tonight's full moon.
Tonight's full moon. On that note, in ironic fashion, today is the full moon. So when did we have to go to commercial break, but when did so we talked about the marching kind of started sliding back in the early 70s. When did the backing the sand start?
I think they've been doing that for as long as I
Well,
know. They still do it.
Yeah. There's some
still do it.
There's still a few yards that when it started, apparently, and this was, I think Mr. Ernest related this on to us many years ago, that some of the missionaries that came here, a lot of them came from cold countries where they had snow at Christmas, and they thought, well, we can't have snow, let's put the white sand in the yard. Tourism. That's the analogy that I think makes sort of logic.
Okay, that does make sense though.
Well, I think it kind of went out when we started running out of beach and people don't want you to take sand anymore.
Yeah. Sure.
There's fines for taking sand.
No,
now.
absolutely. Yeah. You can't take sand from the beach.
No.
On that note, let's go to our commercial break. When we come back, we'll be hearing more about Christmas in Cayman as part of the special CI Retro Talk Today episode. Back with more Talk Today right after this.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best and sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Attention, Caymanians! The registration deadline for the 2021 elections has been extended until 20 January 2021. Caymanians turning 18 on or before the May 26 elections may register now. In order to vote in the 2021 elections, you must register by the 20th of January. For more information, visit elections.ky or the elections office at Baytown Office Suites opposite the Wharf Restaurant.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. And I'm pleased to have in studio again Mr. Loxley Banks, along with Miss Patricia Bettino Langfit, former Miss Cayman from 1977, who's joining us in studio today for this special CI Retro Talk Today feature, focusing on Christmas in Cayman and the evolution of the traditions across all three islands, across all of the focus points of Christmas, from the music to the food to the religious aspects to the seafarers and their returning home for Christmas. Mr. Banks.
Yeah, well, in this next segment, you'll hear more about the spirituality, the food, and, of course, the bull runs, which I think only actually happened in West Bay, because this was, sort of a very looked forward to activity in West Bay during, let's say, anywhere from the 15th or maybe the 10th or 12th on up through Christmas Day. And you'll hear about this in this segment, so we'll have it up right now.
Well, one of the things that I noted from some of the narratives that we've listened to, all of which are extremely interesting, was the amount of talk about food, of course, and how important food was to the whole celebration, as well as the spiritual aspect of things. Right. And in particular, the preparation of the heavy cakes made of all sorts of things, yam, cassava, of course, you name it, they used.
Sweet potato.
Absolutely.
Pumpkin.
And
even biscuit.
And that's one tradition that has been, to some extent, passed on, not as much as perhaps we would like to know that it's passed on, but it has been maintained. And so we still can get our heavy cake at Christmas, especially if you go to East End. Yeah. But then also it was interesting to note that when the Dr. Roy and Mrs. Marin were speaking in that interview, that they mentioned the fact that the food provisions were mainly obtained locally, which is now no longer the case, of course.
Yeah.
So that was quite an interesting change to what we now have to deal with.
Well, families would actually plant a ground at certain time in the year so that they could harvest it
at Christmas.
Come Christmas time.
And same thing, with the beef and stuff. They had them. They was bring them, get them fat up for the Christmas. And I remember when we used to kill these cattle or these cows, and they would have a big tree, usually, some fruit trees. They did all the thing underneath there, and then they would cut them up the night before, so that the blood, everything drained out. And then the next morning they would cut them up, and people would come. And when you went to get a lot of meat, you always told them to make sure you put some fat in there. That remember it was telling you about how that preserved the meat for for long periods of time. Yeah.
You mentioned cows and so forth. And one of the really exciting times in West Bay that it was, and I think it only really happened in West Bay, was when they would bring up the cattle from Swan Island.
Yeah.
And that was usually maybe 4 or 5 days before Christmas, or 10 days before Christmas. And they would bring up cattle from Swan Island to butcher during Christmas time. And these cattle that were raised down there, when the calf was born, they just turned it loose out in the wild. It ran the whole island. And when they were ready to, I think they only put rope on them, as the old folks said, about twice. They caught them one time especially the bull calves, to castrate them, and then when they was going to bring them up, and they were wild.
Yeah.
And to get them off of the schooners, they had to push them overboard.
And they swim ashore.
And well, they would put their head up right on the stern of the cat boat just to keep it out of the water. And when they hit the beach, it took 2 or 3 men to control them. Yeah. And we called it the bull runs, because they would come at you.
I wondered what that was, the bull run.
Yes, that.
I had no. This is the first time
I remember
I'm hearing
one
that.
Time. Right there on Henning Beach in West Bay. Oh Lord!
Remember,
Father.
Remember Van Dyke Bush. He was one of they didn't have. They killed the cow by chopping its head. They would put him, and then I remember one time, this was so funny. They brought this big steer from Swan Island, and it was up, and the market was up, where it is by Mr. Prentice shop.
By Mr. Prentice shop.
Yeah.
Opposite.
And Dikey, that would call him Dikey. He gets up on time. This was one of the big old steers. Brahma bulls or steers. And he got up on this. It was so big that he had to step, because he wasn't a big guy. He he had to stand up on the kind of box so he could get a good. So he could get a good, shot at the head. This axe was sharp, and man, like it turned her loose, and that axe stuck in the neck, and that bull shook his head, broke the rope, and headed down Church Street. And when they finally caught him, he was down by where the police station is.
Oh my!
He died. I mean,
exhaustion.
But they had to pick him up and
get him all the way back. That was no easy task.
No. But these are some of the things that.
Oh man.
They were not all easy times.
No,
I mean, it
not
was our forefathers, went through a lot to bring this country to where we're at today, and I think some of what they, I'm sure, would have liked to pass on to us, we're letting slip away, and I think that's something that we have to be very, very careful about. And I think most important is that spiritual aspect that is wound around in Christmas.
Absolutely.
And of course, everybody here on the island certainly will have an opportunity to participate in some of the spiritual celebrations that will be going on, and we urge you all to, because we all have to be very thankful and know that we're blessed.
Well, Mr. Lox, I would agree with you, the spiritual aspect and also the community aspect.
Yes.
Because we really have become quite disjointed as a community, and it's very unfortunate because that feeling of community really strengthened us as a community and enabled us to do things for one another and make the season even more special. But the whole year long, the relationships were that much stronger because of that community spirit. So I think that even though we might have a greater number and variety of spirituality influences, shall we say, the fact remains that there's nothing to prohibit people from interacting with each other the way that we used to, if we make the effort to do so.
I think that's the key. It's making the time.
Yes.
Because I think we have so many other alternatives.
Yes.
And I think unless we choose, and it's all about choices, to make God, the church, and relationships the focus, then we will just get drawn away into everything else.
Other things come in play.
And that's a key.
Well, some of the new voices you heard on that segment was Patrick Smith, Arthland Pedley, Rupert Ackerman, and also Jamo, I think, had a little part in there. And they were all talking about spirituality, and they talked about the food and all these other things. And those bull runs, they were exciting for the young folks because, like it was mentioned, once the boat hit the beach to where the cattle was on terra firma, they really took off. They had to push them off of the deck of this big schooners. It was usually the Adams that transported these, went back and forth. Sometimes the Jemison, and I from the deck of the Adams down to where the water level was at was probably 4 or 5 feet, 6 feet, and you had to push these big cattle off of this deck down in deep water. It was deep water.
Well, they didn't want to go.
No, that's for sure.
I can see that.
and then they would hold their head up out of the water. But a cow can swim a little bit, but they would have to assist them to get up to shore. And once they got to shore,
they bolt off.
Oh,
they weren't very happy cows.
No. And but it was exciting for all the young folks because they were, everybody on that day tried to make sure they had a red handkerchief, a red flag, because they say if you wave the red at a
they
bull,
run at it.
Yeah.
So was the game, all the kids would just line up along the beach and try to get this cow to run towards them?
Yeah. And of course the man handling the cattle was not very appreciative of that.
Well, it's exciting
I imagine
to go
not.
down there. because the children would all go down there to see what was going on. That's the excitement for the day.
Yeah,
I'd forgotten about the coming from Swan Island. I've actually been to Swan Island. There's not much out there.
There's not much there.
No, but I'd forgotten about that. But the funny thing was I almost told that story, and I thought, oh, that's not a good radio story. And that was the story told about the axe in the head of the bull that just kept running. It didn't quite hit it well enough, and it just took off running.
Bolted,
yeah, it just bolted. It supposed to. I think it ended up in front of Mr. Prentice's shop.
Yeah, well, it got a little further up the way up to on Church Street.
I'm still. Did you ever participate in the bull runs? Were you ever?
Oh yeah.
I'm kind of curious. Like, you have the wealth of stories, and you have some stories that you haven't fully shared about yourself. So I'm trying to get our listeners.
Well, I was just in the mix with the other children. You know.
Taunting the cows.
Yes.
The ones getting in trouble by all the grown-ups trying to control the cows.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing, Mr. Banks. On that note, let's get ready for our 2 p.m. headline news. We come back, we'll have more of our special CI Retro Talk Today episode.
From district to district, moving through the waters to Cayman Brack and Little Cayman. Your station, your voice. All things Cayman. One radio, many people. This is home.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have on the island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. Police are investigating a Georgetown robbery early Monday morning. They say an injured man walked into the Georgetown police station around 2 a.m. and said he had been assaulted by a group of people who took his cell phone and wallet. Anyone with information is encouraged to call the Georgetown police station at 949-4222 or call the confidential tip line at 949-7777. In international news, Russian police have arrested an ultra-conservative defrocked priest during a raid on a women's monastery that he had taken control of. Charges against Father Sergei include encouraging minors to kill themselves. The controversial cleric was barred from preaching in April and then stripped of the right to wear a cross in May after he encouraged the faithful to disobey public health orders. A Japanese company and Kyoto University have joined forces to develop what they hope will be the world's first satellites made out of wood by 2023. Space junk is becoming an increasing problem as more satellites are launched into the atmosphere. Wooden satellites would burn up without releasing harmful substances into the atmosphere or raining debris on the ground when they plunge back to Earth. Almost 5 years of studying the deep Atlantic has revealed 12 species new to science. The sea mosses, mollusks, and corals have eluded discovery because the seafloor is so unexplored, scientists say. Researchers warn that the newly discovered animals could already be under threat from climate change. These are your latest headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
your voice, your choice, your radio.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. Hopefully you've been tuning in for all of our show, but in case you are just now tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks, and pleased to have in studio Mr. Loxley Banks and Miss Patricia Patino Langfit here for a special CI Retro Talk Today special focusing on Christmas throughout the Cayman Islands. Mr. Banks, I'll throw it right back to you.
Yeah, well, all throughout the program, music has been mentioned, which is very important in Christmas celebration. And right here, we've put together a medley of what we believe to be original Cayman Islands songs, Cayman Islands Christmas songs. We think that there are probably maybe upwards of 50 to 60, somewhere between 45 and 60 original Cayman songs that have been created here by various artists. And we've put together a medley of 11 of those of those songs. And we can let you hear that now. It's a medley. It's a 14-minute segment of Cayman Christmas original music.
Christmas bells are ringing over land and sea. You can hear them ringing, oh so merrily. You can hear the children playing in their glee. Christmas bells are ringing for you and me. Oh, away, you are merry, Merry Christmas, with all its trimmings to go. I hope we don't have no blue Christmas, although we don't have any snow.
Merry, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So let's get together and sing it all through the year. Here comes Santa for all the boys and girls. This song is dedicated to all the people around the world. God made it rain, and God made it sea. God made your love a chance that means the world to me.
It's another holiday. You're still somewhere far away, and it looks like my Christmas will be blue. I sit here all alone, staring at the telephone, 'cause Christmas comes around much more than you. Mistletoe above my door, walk on in, make your encore, 'cause I'll be here if you come passing through. Gifts for you and me underneath our Christmas tree, 'cause Christmas comes around much more
more than you.
Hello, Cayman Islands. Another year is gone, eh? It's Christmas, and can you believe it? Yeah. Let's think for a minute the reason for the season. Jesus' birth meant peace on earth, joy, love, and happiness for all. And let's take some time this season to share and care for those less fortunate than we are. Let everyone in the Cayman Islands, wherever you may be, Cayman Brac, Little Cayman, Grand Cayman, let's show love and kindness.
I just love the feeling the Christmas breeze. I just love the feeling here in the West Indies. I just love the feeling the Christmas breeze. I just love the feeling here in the West Indies. January, salty can be so harsh. February, nor'wester and strong seas. March is parch, go and we plant we starch. April brings spring and blossom to trees. I just love the feeling feeling the Christmas breeze. I just love the feeling. Here in the West Indies, I just love the feeling. Feeling the Christmas breeze, I just love the feeling.
Grandpa, check out this brand new song I just wrote. Here's your copy of the script.
But you must be trying to talk to this girl.
Well, you know, you gotta leave that young girl alone and look at the script. This is a good one.
Okay, baby, I'll talk to you later. Go ahead, go ahead.
Pay attention. It's a song for the season. And I'm not talking about pepper and salt. I'm talking to time of the year that it is.
Boy, look at that dumb as you think I is. Now sing the song, man.
Okay, the song goes like this. You read the middle part and I'll read the first part. You understand?
Yeah, I understand. Your handwriting look like Japanese, but I'll see what I can do.
'Tis the season to be dodging.
You mean dodging all them police roadblocks?
La 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 la.
That a song?
Nope, that's just the introduction.
Wait, let me hear the song, man.
Okay, it's called the 12 Canaan Days of Christmas. And it starts off with a little something like this.
Let me hear it.
Should I start at the bottom or should I start at the top?
Buzz, if you don't start this song, I gotta give you one lick on your top and make you drop on your bottom.
Okay then, on the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me one JA visa.
Buzzer, that is nothing to get excited about. That only good for one trip.
And on the second day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 2 turtle steaks.
I hope they're well cooked, although I'm vegetarian.
On the third day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 3 free-range chickens.
That didn't get caught by a certain nationality.
That's correct. On the fourth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me $4.38 a gallon.
Boy, I can't even drive my 2006 wagon. Then again, Fuzzy, I VIP. I get free gas.
Grandpa, I strongly recommend Pepto-Bismol.
Not that kind of gas. You try hush.
And then on the fifth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 5 backbench seats.
Well, Fuzzy, you're not supposed to sing that.
I did.
You talked it, but you didn't sing it.
Okay, I sang it, sing it, talk it.
Sing it, man. I want to hear sing it, man.
On the fifth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 5 backbench seats.
I wonder if Supreme did the upholstery.
You know, the life that you save just might be for me.
Or maybe
for you.
When that special time of the year comes round, it brings warm feeling that starts from way down deep inside. Those warm feeling, and they're just so good that you want to shout. So let's everybody spread them apart, for it's Christmas time and it brings along the warm feeling. Now we all know that Christmas is a sharing time and a season of joy, and it means so much just for me to share those warm feelings. And they're just so good that you want to shout. So let's everybody spread them apart, for it's Christmas time and it brings along those warm feelings.
Santa got a sunburn, Santa got a sunburn, that's why he's all red. He took off the suit and his big black boots and even the cap on his head. He was on vacation down in the islands, even brought his sled. Santa got a sunburn, Santa got a sunburn, that's why he's all red. Brought his gifts across the ocean, but forgot his suntan lotion. He was the reddest thing you've ever seen down in the sunny Caribbean. Santa got a sunburn, Santa got a sunburn, that's why he's all red. He took off the suit and his big black boots and even the cap on his head. He was on vacation down here in the islands, even brought his sled. Santa got a sunburn, Santa got a sunburn, that's why he's all red.
Well, you heard that medley of Cayman indigenous Christmas music, and there was one adaptation in there, but the rest of them were, songs written by Caymanians about Christmas celebrations and all that we do here around the Christmas time. And if you were trying to figure out who all the artists was, well, give us a call here sometime. We'll let you know who they all are. But they were some of the more popular ones by Loxley Banks, Bobby Joe, and Marvin Brooks, and Cardinal DaCosta, and of course, you like that Fuzzy and Grandpa, I think.
That was funny.
And that's our own in-house comedy duo.
I kind of wish they were here right now. I wish I'd known we were going to feature their song, so we could have them in studio to ask them about how they came up with that delightful, creative rendition.
They have come up with a number of those. I guess you could call humorous presentation.
They're quite comical, the two of them, even in their natural state. We're referring to our own Will Sinatra and Mr. Jared Cole. Who are the comedic dynamic duo. But in real life, I've always said they should have their own show.
There you go.
Because if you just put them in the same room, they're kind of like two wild animals that see each other and they go nuts for the first 30 seconds and then they calm down. It's a great, it's entertaining.
We have to do that another time then.
It's a whole show just about that.
Yeah. But put them in here with people you might not get to see because they seclude themselves in that little back studio there. I think just go at it.
No, that's exactly what would happen. On that note, let's go to our last commercial break of the segment. We're back with more CI Retro on Talk Today right after this.
The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. We are a not-for-profit, member-centric plan with a democratically elected volunteer board of trustees representing all sectors of the Cayman Islands economy. We have an all-in expense ratio of less than 1%, over 20,000 members, and $490 million in assets under management. We were the first multi-employer pension plan approved by the regulator in the late 1990s, and today we are still strong, secure, and are here for our employees and employers alike. If you would like to join or require further information, visit chamberpension.ky. And for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you.
Interested in starting a career in maintenance? Register now to UCCI's TVET Preventative Maintenance course. Students will gain practical skills and theoretical knowledge in electrical installation and repair, servicing air conditions and refrigeration systems, and more. Classes start on January 18th.
Register now on our website at connect.ucci.edu.ky/register/short courses.
Or visit us from January 6th to the 12th for face-to-face registration.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. Thanks for tuning in for the tail end of our show. I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. Again, pleased to have in studio Mr. Loxley Banks, along with Miss Patricia Patino Langfit, here with a special CI Retro feature on Christmas. Mr. Banks, put it back to you for our musical finale.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about music, and music is, universal language. It's a big part of all of us, I think.
Absolutely correct, it is.
And Christmas music, of course, this time of year, well, that's where it's at, because you won't hear them after about I suppose New Year's Day. You probably won't hear those Christmas music anymore until next year, 15th of December.
It's probably why they've maintained their power. It's because we only get to hear them 3 or 4 weeks a year, right? If we heard them all the time, these wouldn't have that same influence on us, and
and as we said, we think that indigenous Caymanian Christmas music, there's probably somewhere between 45 and 60 individual pieces that have been created. And what you just heard a little while ago was just a sample of that. I think there was about 11 pieces in there that we thought that would be representative of Caymanian Christmas music. And of course, the last one that you heard on that segment was Santa Got a Sunburn, which And this next segment is for all of you young songwriters, want-to-be songwriters, musicologists out there, artists. We're going to hear from the Barefoot Man about his inspiration for the song Santa Got a Sunburn, which we believe is the most commercially successful Cayman Islands original Christmas song and having the most international exposure and popularity. It certainly gets played a lot here. And, for the songwriters, inspiration is what a lot of songwriters write about. It's what they hear a phrase or they hear this or they see something and they're able to bring it to music and lyric and so forth. And some years ago I spoke with Barefoot about this song after it was so successful. And here's that, it's just a 6-minute talk about a little joshing with Barefoot because he always complained that he did not get enough airplay on Radio Cayman. And we joshed about that all the time, and you'll hear that right at the beginning of the cut. So, Fox, can we have it?
Now, you've recorded, by my count, some 12 to 15 Christmas songs, 2 of which I believe are very original, except that you use some variations of the 7 notes on the musical scale.
Well, that's a matter of opinion, Loxley. Come on, you're giving me a hard time this morning. I don't know. You know what? I've never read music. I still today don't read music. I just do it.
Well, anyway, those variations sounded quite well, even though the highs might have been a little too low or the low too high.
And you know what? 40 years later, I'm still doing that. So,
and in between, always spill the one or the other side.
Yes, you're right. Can't argue with you.
The 2 songs that I'm thinking about are Santa Got a Sunburn and Let Me Wrap You in My Arms This Christmas. Now, Santa Got a Sunburn, what was the inspiration or where did that originate?
Okay, the inspiration was my son, who's a grown man now, he's 38, something like that. When he was a little boy, he always asked a lot of questions. And one day when I was tucking him in the bed and it was around Christmas time, just out of the blue, he said something to the effect of, "Why is Santa red, Dad? Why isn't he green? Why isn't he blue? Why is he red?" And of course, I didn't want my 2-year-old to get the better of me, so I had to think of something really quick. And the first thing that popped in my mind, I said, because he came to the Cayman Islands, he got sunburned. That's why. And he's been sunburned ever since. And he's like, "Oh, okay." And then after I left, after I sat back down and had myself a drink, I said, "That's an idea for a song, Santa got a sunburn. That's why he's all red," especially an island, tropical type of thing. So I wrote it it didn't take me no time to really write it. There's an interesting story about that, Loxley, if you don't mind me telling you.
Go ahead.
Back in the days, in the late 70s, right through the 80s, up to the 90s, when I worked at the Holiday Inn for so many years, and I lived in Breakers, which I still do. I've always lived in Breakers. But I would drive home at night after work, and I would get off really, back then around 1 o'clock in the morning, and I would tune into AM stations that came in real powerful. I'm sure you recall that.
Yeah, WGBS, QAM, and
yeah, just different stations in the States, and I would listen to them on my way to Breakers. And the reason, and especially right after I recorded this song, because I had a small label in the U.S. that released it, and they promised to get it around. It was one of those deals where you pay them to release it. Okay. Yeah. So I said, boy, let me see if anybody is playing this thing in the U.S. So and after about 4 or 5 nights listening, I never heard it much, but I kept listening, and all of a sudden the song came on, and the one where the dogs are barking to the tune of Jingle Bells?
Yes.
Okay? Which is a really crazy novelty song. And so the DJ came on, and right after that, and he says, "That is one crazy song." He says, "But I tell you what, folks, I found something that's even crazier than that one." He says, "Listen to this." And he played Santa Got a Sunburn. And now, when I told my wife that, and she says, "What, he called you song crazy?" I says, "That's beside the point." I says, "I got played." I was, there millions of people listen to that, yes. Okay? And about 3 nights in a row afterwards, when I was driving home, I heard the song. And then, of course, the request for the record came in. Record 45 RPM back then. And they called down the hotel and from all over the U.S., and people requested the song. And then later on, the following year, we did an album with it on, and which really did well.
What year would that have been?
While I'm talking, I'm thinking. I would say that was probably the late 70s to be safe, something like that.
You say your son is 38 now, so that would have been 36 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. I was close. Yeah. Okay. You check it up. You check it right up on me there. Boy, give me a break at all.
I'll do the math a little later.
Okay.
Any idea how many copies did you sell with that?
Oh my gosh. No, I don't. I remember the first 45 RPM that I brought the Cayman on that, and I think I did around 1,000 or so. And I know I sold those out. And I've always said, I still do it on my performance. When I perform, even today, I make a standard joke with the tourists all the time. I say, well, you folks may not know this, but I've recorded about 20 albums, and they've all gone gold. And of course, the audience is always, wow, oh, we didn't. And I get applause. I says, I do need to clarify, by the way, folks, in the Cayman Islands, you have to sell 32 copies to get a gold record. and through that, actually, over the years, just as a joke, not to brag or anything, Andy Martin and I used to, we would take the 45 RPM. Once we hit 32, we would spray paint it gold and hang it up in our house. And I still have a couple of those. But anyway, I went through the first 1,000, because on the other flip side of that was Let Me Wrap You in My Arms It's Christmas, if I'm correct in that. Then the following year, we did a Christmas album, and it came out on the Christmas album, and the album really did well. And again, but in a small market like Grand Cayman or the Cayman Islands, to sell 200 or 300 is pretty exceptional.
Especially that at that time.
At time, exactly. I mean, and what's really interesting, and now today, I mean, the whole table has turned. It's almost impossible to sell a physical, which is CD now. Okay, that almost don't exist anymore. Thank goodness for iTunes. Also, there's a company I deal with called CD Baby. Another one is called Dual Tone Records, which are all online people, and they go through. I can't remember all that. They deal with the different online people. But they have sort of taken up the slack of that.
Well, that Dual Tone Records been around for a long, long time. They go way, way back.
Yes, they do, and they have some interesting artists on there. Bobby Bear, I think Johnny Cash, some really interesting art. But I've got a little deal going with them, and they put it on iTunes. They put it on Spotify. I think it's another company. I've been very happy with them.
Well, back memories.
Yes, that's the story.
I remember him singing that at the Holiday Inn, and I remember I actually had that 45. I don't know where that is now. I lost it somewhere along the way.
Well, to think, he said he brought in 1,000 copies of the 45. And at that time, 77, 78, the population of Cayman was
10,000 people.
Well, it could have been 13,000, 14,000 probably at that time. And for that amount of records to be sold, and it probably was more than that. It might have went up to 3,000 or 4,000 copies.
This actually guaranteed that it was in every home, right?
Yeah.
And that was just the reality of it. That's fantastic. You've hit your national symbol when every home's got your record playing.
That's true.
Yeah, and the popularity that it received overseas, and every Caymanian overseas probably had a copy of it.
I just remember that so well, and I remember, we had it in Port Arthur.
That's great.
But I remember, George getting excited talking about that. It got picked up, on the radio, and I remember that whole thing. I've kind of forgotten about that. But it was very exciting. Very exciting that he made national airplay.
Yeah. In the 70s, right?
In the late 70s.
When, a generation of music came out in the 70s, and that was an era for so much music coming out to actually get your name out there and your song played on that level of a station. Yeah, it's impressive.
And our Barefoot Man did it.
Yeah.
It was exciting.
From an island of 10,000 people, 12,000 people, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes it even that much more impactful. It wasn't an island of 1 million people. It was an island of 12,000. And that song comes out. And I like how you shared the story about how the song came to pass, and because it added more color to it.
And that's just a lesson for, as we mentioned before, all your musicologists, all your young songwriters, because, many of the lasting songs that we hold between our ears and our memory were created from, just inspiration. Someone seeing something, someone saying something, and they're writing it down. And another one of the most popular Christmas songs internationally, that is "Little Toy Trains," which was recorded by Roger Miller, and I think there was another guy who had a big record on it also. But he wrote that after playing with his son Christmas morning on their living room floor, and his son had this little toy train, and how interested he was in these little toy trains. And he said he wrote the song 10 minutes after that, after he viewed his son.
So I think we need to challenge some of these young people now, some of the local musicians. We send them out a challenge to think of something and come up with some new Christmas songs.
Yeah, not only Christmas songs, but there's lots to write about in Cayman that that should be inspirational to a lot of people.
I'm actually going to pass this along to my son's 8, and he's big into music himself, and so one of his challenges for the year is to actually write his own song.
Oh, there
Funny
you go.
enough, he wants to actually be a part of the national song competition, so he wants to write his own song, and I'm going to have to pass along these words of wisdom to him.
Very good.
Yes, well, I mean, you can go right through most of the musical genres.
Sure.
Genres.
Yeah.
And you'll find those stories. One of the most, I guess, everlasting, spiritual songs that made it big in, you want to call it the pop world, was the I Saw the Light. And that song is, everybody in the world almost that wanted to sing a song recorded that. And that was created from, Hank Williams wrote it. But it was his inspiration. I think his mother was a keyboard organist, and she did some outside of the city where they lived performances, and they'd be coming home at night. And you probably can relate to this, Patricia. And a lot of the cities, they had water towers, big water towers, and there was always a light on this water tower, a flashing light, more or less. And he remembered coming back home, and he was always looking for the light because he was looking to see. He knew they were getting close to home, and so later years he went back to that inspiration and created the song "I Saw the Light."
Because he knew he was home when he saw the light on the top of the tower.
Yes, and there's a local story that goes along with "I Saw the Light." It's about a good friend of mine, actually.
Is this a Romance by Moonlight song?
Yeah.
Is it a Romance by Moonlight song at Christmas time?
Well, no, it's probably the reverse of that.
Oh boy! All right.
But he tells the story. He was, he played a little music and he liked to drink a strong drink once in a while. And
you see a lot of things after you drink a strong drink after a while.
Well, but anyway, this one night he went home, and I guess he might have, or his wife, I guess, thought he was getting a little belligerent with her, and this was back in the days of the lanterns, and she hit him with the lantern, with the light, threw the light at him, and he said, "I saw the light," and he quit drinking. He quit drinking from that moment on.
There's more than one way to interpret a song, isn't there?
Right, that's right.
That might be a good place to wrap up our show today. We are out of time on today's show, so we do need to call it a wrap. Thank you for tuning in to our special CI Retro Talk Today episode. Thank you again to all of our loyal listeners out there in Radio Cayman Nation, to Mr. Paul Cal, to Mr. Loxley Banks for organizing this special show, and to Miss Patricia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Miss Patricia Jackson Patino, but now known as Miss Patricia Patino Langford.
Yes.
Yes. Just make sure we get clarified for all our listeners out there. Thank you. You've been a pleasure
Thank you
to
so
have
much.
in the studio today.
It was wonderful.
No, thank you.
Former Miss Cayman Islands 77, and she was able to bring a little contrast, a little relationship to how Caymanians celebrated it abroad. All the various big seaports where there was Cayman communities, big Caymanian communities, and they took their Caymanian Christmas culture there, and installed it there.
Absolutely, and it was great to have, as Mr. Banks said, it was great to have your perspective and to add that little context and color to the conversation.
Absolutely. People tend to forget, but Cayman's a little tiny place, but we've reached into a lot of the world.
We have, and people forget, but we have Mr. Banks, and thankfully for C.I. Rector and his wealth of knowledge and history is always a pleasure to have on the show for that. On behalf of the entire Radio Cayman family, thank you again for sharing your afternoon with us. I'm Raymond Singh. God bless, and have a safe rest of your Tuesday. Oh, well.